Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. Today we are looking at something that feels a little less like a technical manual and a little more like a ghost story.
Yeah, ghost story for the planet. That's a good way to put it.
Right. We have a stack of notes here on chapter 14 of the book The Awakening, Securing the Living Earth. It's by Mahendra Shah, and the chapter is titled Healing the Past to Safeguard the Future.
And I think it's important to set the stage here immediately for you listening. If you are tuning in expecting a breakdown of carbon capture technology.
Or like a policy paper on reforestation targets.
Exactly. Or global temperature limits, you really might want to adjust your expectations. Mahendra Shah is a heavyweight in ecological theory, but in this specific chapter, he takes a hard pivot. It's a complete left turn. Usually when we talk about ecological recovery, I'm thinking about science, I'm thinking about engineering, planting 1 million trees, banning plastic straws, the whole fix-it list.
The mechanical approach.
Yeah. But Shah argues that recovery isn't just about biology or chemistry. He says it's about memory and grief.
Right. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore this concept he calls ecological memory. The core argument is that the land, the animals, and even us humans, we are all holding on to a memory of trauma.
And you can't actually fix the environment until you acknowledge that memory. It's about listening before you start building.
Which is controversial in some circles because it sounds so abstract.
Yeah.
But Shah grounds it in some really specific imagery.
He does. Let's unpack this idea of ecological memory because it sounds very poetic. But he starts with this analogy about a clay pot that I found just really helpful.
It's the foundational metaphor for the whole chapter, really. He asks us to imagine a clay pot that has been cracked and buried under the sand for centuries.
Just shards of pottery to the naked eye.
Right. But Shah argues that the clay remembers. It remembers the hand that shaped it, and it remembers the specific heat of the kiln that fired it.
Which is just a beautiful way of saying that nothing ever truly forgets its original form, whether it's a stone, a seed, or a river.
And from there, Shah takes us right into this scene, described as the Council of Trees.
I loved this part. The way he personifies these trees, giving them voices, it's incredible.
It is a literary device, sure, but he's using it to point to a biological truth about how ecosystems record history. He highlights 2 trees that are culturally very significant in South Asia, the neem tree and the peepal tree.
Yeah, so the neem tree stands up first, and I fully expected it to say something like, I remember the rainfall data from 1990.
But it doesn't.
No, it says, we remember the salt in the soil. It remembers the drought that burned its cousins. And this was the detail that got me. It remembers the smell of a boy who climbed its branches during a flood.
It says he smelled of smoke and wet earth.
Smoke and wet earth. That specificity is key to Shah's argument, isn't it?
Absolutely. He's saying that ecological memory isn't abstract data, it's sensory, it's lived experience. And then you have the peepal tree, which is often the Bodhi tree, associated with wisdom.
And it offers this profound insight. It says, our roots do not speak in the past tense. They carry what has been into what may still become.
That is a total perspective shift.
It really is. We usually think of memory as looking backward, like flipping through a photo album.
But the tree is saying memory is the fuel for the future.
Yeah.
The tree's current health, the way its branches curve, that is a direct result of its history. The past isn't behind it, it's inside it.
And the text connects this tree wisdom to human wisdom, specifically looking at the elders from the Sawara Hills.
Oh, this part was fascinating.
Yeah, so these elders sit in a circle, barefoot, and they touch the ground. But the text says they're moving their fingers over the dirt like they're reading Braille.
And when they are asked why they do that, their answer is simple but devastating. They say because the soil stores everything. Grief, joy, names. Our duty is to listen until it speaks.
Listen until it speaks. That seems to be the running theme of this whole chapter. We are so busy trying to tell the earth what to do.
Grow here, flow there.
Right, yield this much crop. And we completely forget to listen to what it's already holding.
And that leads us directly into the second major theme of this chapter, which is rituals. But we need to be clear here, Shah isn't talking about empty ceremonies or photo ops for politicians.
No, he calls them rituals of witnessing.
Exactly. These aren't attempts to fix things with steel and glass. They're attempts to remember the wound.
One of the most striking examples was from the wetlands of Karnataka.
Yes, tell us about that one.
So the text describes women floating these little clay figurines down the canal banks. They're shaped like fish and lotus flowers. And while they do this, they're singing lullabies. But here's the kicker. They're singing in a language that the young people don't even speak anymore.
It's a ritual of mourning. Each of those figurines represents a species that has been lost in that ecosystem.
Some they know the names of, some they don't.
But it's an offering. And the text notes that this isn't a protest. There are no microphones, there are no news cameras, it's just witnessing.
It mentions a spotted owlet watching from an electric wire and the wind carrying the song to a frog pond where the last bullfrog sang 20 years ago. The mud held space for his echo. That line gave me absolute chills.
It's about validation, acknowledging that something was here and now it is gone. We see a similar thing happening in the Scottish Highlands, but with a very different energy.
Right, the volunteers with the moss.
Sphagnum moss. It's crucial for peatlands, which act like the lungs of the earth. The text describes volunteers pressing it into the peat in the thick fog.
It's described as very slow, quiet work.
Yes, but the volunteers report feeling a sense of implicit permission.
Like the land has paused its weeping just long enough to let them kneel there without shame.
That's a heavy emotion, shame.
It is. We usually talk about guilt and environmentalism. You know, I drove my car too much, I used a plastic bag. But shame is different. It's deeper.
It is. Guilt is about what you did. Shame is about who you are. These rituals seem to be a way to process that shame so that people can actually act.
If you move across the ocean to British Columbia, you see a community holding a fire for the lost salmon run.
The river there is described as a hesitant whisper, where it used to roar.
And the kids are painting stones with symbols of swimming and migration and placing them in a spiral.
And there's that image of the gray heron watching them from a boulder. The text interprets the heron's look as a question. Are you really ready to carry memory, not as a burden, but as an offering?
That's the shift, isn't it? Turning the heavy burden of we destroyed this into an offering of we remember this.
Correct, and sometimes that offering is quite literal. In the Yarra Valley Range, the text describes elders and even stray dogs climbing the hill with rice and lentils.
To feed leopards that haven't been seen in decades.
Exactly. They are putting food down next to saplings where leopard tracks haven't been seen for years.
Most people would call that crazy, or at least a complete waste of food.
But the text frames it differently. It says no one speaks of retribution. They speak of feeding what might return.
Even if the wind eats it first. That is faith. That is pure faith. You set the table even if you don't know if the guest is coming.
It is. And it bridges us into the idea that it's not just humans doing the remembering. Animals possess this ecological memory too. They are navigating the ghosts of the landscape just like we are.
This section blew my mind. The elephants.
That is a heartbreaking example.
The text describes a herd that paused for hours at a spot on a road where there was nothing but asphalt.
But a baobab tree used to stand there. It had been cut down for road widening.
But the local people knew that the matriarch had given birth under that specific tree long ago.
So she's standing there, remembering a tree that isn't there, folding time back on itself. She's seeing the landscape as it was, not just as it is.
And in a coastal village swallowed by the sea, there are crabs that still walk a specific path at dusk.
The text calls it a crooked line, tracing something that no longer exists.
They are navigating a landscape that is physically gone, but memorialized in their behavior.
But the moment, the absolute aha moment of the entire text for me, was the leopard.
I knew you were going to bring up the leopard. This is the philosophical core of the chapter.
I have to. So the text talks about a leopard remembering the drums, the fire, the machines that shoot up the hill.
But then there's this dialogue, almost like a fable. Shaw asks the leopard what justice feels like.
And I expected the leopard to say, justice is you leaving, or justice is the forest growing back.
But what does it say?
It says, it feels like someone finally asked where I went.
It feels like someone finally asked where I went. That completely reframes the idea of environmental justice.
It really does. Usually when we talk about justice, we think about punishment, finding the polluters or lawsuits or compensation.
Right. But here, Shaw is arguing that justice is defined as acknowledgement. It's simply noticing the absence. It's saying, I see that you were gone, and it matters.
It's so simple, yet we miss it constantly. We rush to fix the habitat, but we rarely stop to ask who used to live here.
And that leads to the question of reparations. If justice is acknowledgement, what does reparation look like? Because you can't write a check to a mountain range.
The source material gives us some incredibly creative and frankly heartbreaking examples of this.
Like in the southern deltas, the elders writing letters to the water.
Using ink made of ash.
And they don't sign their own names. They sign the names of the lost estuaries, rivers that dried up 50 years ago.
They tie these letters to clay and sink them. They don't expect a reply, they just want to witness it.
Then there is the example from Alaska, which I think is one of the most powerful indictments in the chapter. Reindeer herders walking 12 days to a town square.
They lay down antlers that have been scorched by oil flarebacks on wool dyed with berries.
And the quote from the eldest herder, she says, "We were never compensated for the stars that disappeared."
That line destroys the idea that you can put a price tag on environmental damage.
How do you calculate the value of a visible night sky?
You can't. It's a spiritual loss as much as a physical one. It's an infinite loss.
And in Meghalaya, they use sound, placing 7 bamboo flutes near abandoned coal mine shafts, 1 flute for every generation lost.
So when the wind blows, the mountain literally wails. It's giving the land its voice back.
It's interesting how many of these reparations involve sound or silence. In Australia, the text describes apology forums held on old colonial hunting posts.
They sit in circular seating made of eucalyptus and stone.
And a dingo just walks into the circle, sits down next to the eldest speaker, and simply waits.
The ambiguity there is beautiful. Was it listening? Was it bearing witness? The text says the people interpreted it as the land coming to hear the apology. It bridges the gap between the human ritual and the wild reality.
And we can't forget the youth assemblies. This isn't just elders remembering the past.
The text talks about young people sitting on tree stumps, which act as the court, with jackals and banyans as the jury.
They hold charred feathers or photos of drained wetlands.
There's that scene in Nairobi. A young person from a refugee neighborhood says, "We grew up next to factories that named us toxic. Now we are naming ourselves back to the earth."
That is reclaiming identity through ecological connection. They're refusing to be defined by the pollution.
It's powerful stuff. But the text shifts gears towards the end. It moves from grief and reparations to something a bit more hopeful, but still very grounded. Rewilding.
But again, Mahendra Shah redefines the term. Standard rewilding is often, let's fence this off and let the weeds grow. He calls it the return.
And he points out that nature often comes back the moment the concrete cracks.
I loved the specific examples of the return here. The fox and the heron showing up in Glasgow on the remains of a telephone booth.
Or the textile mill where red deer are standing in the warehouse, their antlers dusted in cobwebs.
It's a ghostly image, but it signifies life returning to a place of industry.
It's nature reclaiming the space without asking for permission.
And the California wildfires, it says the lupines, those purple flowers, and the coyotes returned before the bulldozers and the grants were even approved.
That's a direct critique of our bureaucracy. We think we need a permit to restore nature. Nature just needs a crack in the pavement. Nature, untethered from caution, found a way through.
And then, possibly the funniest image in the book, San Jose. A raccoon dragging branches into an abandoned fast food playpen.
And fungi lining the kitchen tiles. It's this idea that what looks like ruin to us looks like an invitation to the non-human world.
The text says the scaffolding of greed had collapsed just long enough for breath to slip back in.
So how does Shaw define rewilding in this context? If it's not just abandoning buildings to raccoons, what is the actual strategy?
He writes that rewilding isn't about rolling back time, it's about remembering a time when seasons didn't apologize.
It's a shift in relationship. It's about integration into urban spaces, too.
Right, in Nairobi, there's a classroom built in a waste site garden, and a giraffe just wanders up to the fence.
And the teacher says, "That's our elder today."
That is a profound pedagogical shift. Treating the animal not as a spectacle or a pest, but as an elder, a teacher.
It changes how those kids will view the world forever.
I also really loved the Berlin example with the artists. They planted wildflowers in cracked pavement with QR codes next to them.
But the QR codes don't ask for money or donations.
No, they tell soil stories. You scan the code and it tells you what happened on that exact spot.
Mustard gas, aroma camp, a child hiding under a lilac bush during the war.
It connects ecological growth with historical memory. It acknowledges that the soil isn't just dirt, it's an archive.
And sometimes, rewilding looks like giving up control entirely. The library example where the basement floods every single winter.
So instead of fighting it and pumping it out, they just let lotus plants grow in the stairwells and people read on rafts.
That is adaptation over repair. It's stopping the fight against the water and learning to live with the rhythm of the flood.
It's a much more humble approach to engineering.
So bringing this all together, the text seems to be arguing against the fix-it mentality that dominates so much of our conservation conversation.
Precisely. The core message of Chapter 14 is that we cannot fix the Earth with the same mindset that broke it.
The mindset of conquest, engineering, and control is the root of the problem. You can't use it as the solution.
So what is the invitation? If we aren't fixing, what are we actually doing?
The invitation is to touch what was broken without trying to fix it too quickly, to sit with the discomfort, the grief, and the memory, to witness.
Real restoration happens through listening. It reminds me of the farmer and the kingfishers. The birds came back to a restored river, and when asked why, the farmer said, "They never left, they just went quiet."
That suggests that the resilience is already there. It's waiting for us to stop making so much noise, literal and metaphorical noise, so it can emerge.
The final image the text leaves us with is so evocative. Roots speaking to seeds that were never scattered.
And the idea that something is listening.
Yes. Something that has been waiting for the human footstep to return, not with conquest, but with care.
It implies a relationship is still possible, despite everything we've done. The earth hasn't given up on us, it's just waiting for us to change how we walk.
That is a beautiful place to land. It really challenges the way I look at the patch of grass outside my window. It's not just landscaping, it's a history book.
It is, and it's a history book that is still being written.
So here is our provocation for you, the listener. It's a question straight from the heart of this text to mull over. If you stood still, really still, in the place where you live, what memory would the soil recount to you?
Not what you built there, but what was there before the concrete.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you on the next one.